So if somebody would say in this first one, after examining 3 manuscripts that included the Pericope Adulterae, I've determined that it is an authentic principle or authentic part of the Gospel of John. What type of false reasoning is that? What's the error in that? Okay. All right. You know, the idea that just examining 3 manuscripts doesn't seem to me to be enough to make a claim like this. So essentially what we have here is a hasty generalization. This next one, these two belong together. So in this source, we've quoted this passage before from Carl Bridges' article in John 7, 53 to 811. The wise preacher will use it with caution, not basing whole sermons on the passage, using it, if at all, as an illustration, and verbally footnoting it as a doubtful passage. If nothing else, a preacher can avoid invoking the old journalistic cliche, this story is too good to check. There's an example of the use of the single quotation marks inside the double quotation marks. And so if you're quoting something like this, and in the middle of it they quote something, what they quote should be in single quotation marks. So anyway, that's what the source says. And then in the paper, you write, why is Professor Bridges so antagonistic to expository preaching? What's wrong with that?
It's attacking him personally rather than the argument.
All right, so it could be an ad hominem attack. Right? It's like he's against antagonistic to expository preaching. Could also be a false analogy. Right? He's not. I mean, that's not really what he's doing. Right? He's not, and just kind of a misrepresentation of his argument as well. It could also be a straw figure. That's probably more along the lines of what this is. Right? His comment has nothing to do with expository preaching. There's nothing in here. Right? So you're essentially trying to say, well, he's wrong because he's against expository preaching. Well, that's not anything like what he said. So over-exaggerating the consequences. How about this one? The Pericope Adulterae is the foundational pillar of the great building of the Gospel of John. Removing it will bring down the entire edifice. I mean, first of all, that's some really lofty writing, and hopefully you would never write anything like that in an actual paper. But what's the problem with that reasoning?
I really think like one story will destroy the whole book. I don't know too much.
Yeah, it's essentially that's the false analogy, right? That passage is in no way a pillar that supports the rest of the Gospel of John. Right? If you remove it, that doesn't have an effect on the rest of the Gospel of John. Right? So it's a false analogy. How about this one? We can be sure the Pericope Adulterae was originally part of the Gospel of John because it is in the Bible. What was that? It is a broad statement. But what type of false reasoning is it? It's part of the Bible because it's in the Bible. That's the circular reasoning, right? Because what you're trying to demonstrate is whether or not it belongs in the Bible. Right? But you're already kind of accepting it's true. So circular reasoning works like that, right? Scripture is true because Scripture claims that it's true. That's circular reasoning. Logically, that doesn't prove anything to make that claim. Same kind of thing here, right? It's originally part of the Gospel of John because, well, it's in my Bible. Well, that that doesn't prove anything. You're essentially you're making a claim that something's true when that's the very thing that you're trying to prove is true or not. How about this one? John Smith, the known liberal theologian and communist, is a supporter of the hypothesis that the pericope adulterae does not belong in the Gospel of John. That is why we should reject it. What type of false reasoning is that? Not quite the bandwagon, although there's a little bit of that. Making this claim, what are you doing? Are you addressing his position? You're attacking his beliefs, his political associations, all of which have nothing to do with whether or not it belongs there. So this is an ad hominem attack. You're attacking the person, or to the man, is what it translates from the Latin. How about this one? Because Jesus forgave the adulterous woman, he was supportive of adultery in certain circumstances. Now, it's obviously false reasoning, but what type of false reasoning is it?
Is that attacking him again?
No, I could see how you get that, but that's not necessarily attacking Jesus.
False premises.
Well, there's certainly some false premises there. But does this second statement follow the first one? All right. It doesn't follow. Just because he forgave the adulterous woman doesn't mean he supported adultery. This is the non sequitur. All right. And so the evidence or the conclusion doesn't follow from the evidence given. How about this one? Either the pericope adulterae belongs in the Gospel of John, or the entire Bible is uninspired. Again, it seems pretty obvious that it's false reasoning, but this would be an example of the false dilemma, right? This isn't an either-or position, right? Because there are a variety of other options that exist for, it's not just a matter of it belonging there or the Bible is uninspired. And the Bible can still be inspired even if that passage doesn't belong there. So now that we've seen some of that, it's important to remember that some of what you'll be doing is not just creating your own arguments. You'll have to be analyzing the arguments of others. And so in the last couple minutes that we have, I want to give you some selections from articles related to this passage and ask you to try and break down what is the claim that this person is trying to make. Is there evidence that we can draw from it, etc. So here's a passage from an article related to this, the pericope we're talking about. The conventional scholarly approach to John 7:53 through 8:11 is first to review and assess its complicated textual history, and from there to study the form and content of the text. I want to reverse this procedure because it seems to me that assumptions about textual history have overdetermined the reading of the text. This paper will therefore follow 4 steps. First, I will reflect on the rhetorical shape of John 7:53. Second, I will survey several interpretations of John 7:53 that misread the shape of the text. Third, I will offer a reading of the text that honors its rhetorical shape. Finally, I will look at the textual history of John and explore the effects of the misreading of this pericope. Patriarchal prejudices thus contributed to, perhaps caused, the canonical marginality of John 7:53 through 8:11. Within the story, the scribes and Pharisees attempted to marginalize the woman. The early church and the interpretive community then attempted to marginalize not only the woman, but her story as well. So what is the claim that this author is making? You can try to put it in your own words. If you can't find a specific sentence or two, overall, what is this author claiming about this passage? Let's start this way. Does she believe it belongs in the Gospel of John? All right. One head shake. All right, so I got a yes and I got a no. That pretty well covers our options, right? So which is it and why is it? Why do you say yes, Tucker?
Just because she's reversing the order at the beginning and going straight to the text and the content, I guess.
Okay. For those of you that felt no, why did you think no? Whether she thinks this passage belongs in the Gospel of John in its normal place or not.
It also said the assumptions about textual history have overdetermined the meaning of the text.
Her claim, her argument, or her claim is essentially these three sentences. And in that, her claim is that the text belongs in the passage, or that message belongs in the text of the Gospel of John, where it normally shows up. And the reason for those cases where it doesn't show up has to do with patriarchal prejudices. So that what happened was the early church and the interpretive community, Christians after that removed this story from the Gospel of John, are marginalizing the woman and her story. Essentially, this is a feminist reading of this gospel, right? And she's using feminist theology to approach this. The irony here, of course, is that in this case, feminist theology is actually supporting the case that this belongs in the Gospel of John. Whereas usually feminist theology kind of works the opposite way, just that patriarchy has influenced readings of the text. In making this claim, she has several categories of evidence. All right? The rhetorical shape, that she believes will evidence this claim. The interpretations of John, right, that misread the shape of the text, support this claim. And her reading of the text supports this claim. And according to her, if she looks at the textual history of this passage, it will support this claim. Right? So in this, it's a couple paragraphs in the actual article. She lays out what her claim is, right before she gets into it, but has also laid out the evidence that demonstrates this, and kind of within this ellipsis part talks about the principles, and then also uses throughout the rest of the article, uses the principles that connect the evidence and the claim. So not only do you need to think about your own construction of arguments, you need to think as well, as you're reading these texts, commentaries, the journal articles, books, etc., what is it that these individuals are claiming, these scholars that I'm reading, what are they claiming? And what's their evidence for that? Is that evidence sufficient? Is it reliable? Is it authoritative? Etc. So that you can take that and determine your own claim or argument. Questions? Comments? Cries of disbelief. All right, so on Monday we will pick up, we're talking some more things related to the construction of the paper, as well as pass around the sign-up sheet for the presentation.